Hi, Steve here from Divorcing Japan, and today's video is about the red flags in dating Japanese that foreigners don't see until it's too late. If you're thinking about dating a Japanese person, this list of things I'm going to give you in this video is crucial for your homework, and it's going to set you up for the best chance of success so you don't end up in a bad situation, perhaps a divorce, perhaps losing your kids. What shocked me most about researching this is it wasn't just my story, it was the amount of people who've gone through exactly the same thing and ended up in exactly the same place. And we can split them into two people: the people who got broken up with and didn't know what the hell was going on, or the people who are still hanging in there and living miserable lives. I'm gonna leave the happy people out of this video because they're happy, they've got it solved, everything's great. So we don't need to focus on that. We're going to talk about the points that are going to really help you if you're thinking about going into a relationship, a serious relationship with a Japanese person. And if you like this kind of content, please support my channel, subscribe, like, and you can buy me a coffee too. I like the old coffee. So let's get into this. I'm going to do this video from my own experience, from people around me's experiences, from what I've seen, and from what I've read online as well. Because it turns out the same stuff is happening over and over again, and people are getting blindsided, and they don't realize it's happening until it's too late. If you've heard these stories before, which I'm sure a lot of you have, then please put your own versions in the comments below. And if you disagree with what I'm saying, please comment below as well, because I read all the comments and I really enjoy getting that insight as well. It's an educational process, and I'm really interested in developing my knowledge about this topic. Number 1, complications with dating. The beginning of dating a Japanese person comes with a lot of pitfalls to be aware of. First of all, as a foreigner, you could be more used to a gradual process of going into a relationship where you date, you see each other for a few months, and then you decide to be a couple, you decide to be together, exclusive, monogamous, etc., etc. But in Japan, it works a little bit differently in a lot of scenarios. And there's two sides to this coin here. The first side is where you think it's casual, but they've already decided, perhaps without letting you know, that it's already exclusive and it's very serious. The other side of the coin is where you think it's serious, but it's not serious to them because you haven't gone through the correct process. Now, Japan has this thing called kokuhaku, which is where somebody declares their love for somebody, and that's the official start of the relationship. If you say, "Suki," I like you, or "I really want to be with you," and you officially say that, then that offer is either accepted or rejected. And if it's accepted, then you become a couple. Ignoring that could find yourself in a place where you think you're together, but the other person doesn't think so. I think we can all put our hands up and say that the honeymoon phase in any relationship, even a relationship with a Japanese person, can be absolutely fantastic. Everything's happy, everything's great, you can't get enough of your partner, everything's so wonderful. And yeah, I'm not jaded at all. I think that this is a great part of the relationship, and wow, yeah, it's so fantastic. But there's something to be aware of, is that in Japan, people don't often say what they mean. And it all comes into this thing we're going to talk about today called gaman. Gaman is the suppressing of emotion that Japanese people utilize to keep everything non-confrontational. Being non-confrontational is part of the Japanese culture. It's something that Japanese people are brought up with through the educational process, through family life, through everything in society is rigged towards not being confrontational. And so you could be in a situation where you think everything's going swimmingly, everything's fantastic, but in actual fact, they're not happy, or they haven't been happy for quite a long time. But because of this non-confrontational aspect, they're actually suppressing any problems they've had. Now, this is good and bad, but as a foreigner, you kind of, when you're getting to know somebody, you do go through that. Stage 2 is classically the argumentative stage. If stage 1 was the honeymoon, stage 2 is the argumentative stage. And then if you survive that, you go into stage 3, which is a more lovey-dovey, more secure place. And then stage 4 is the long-term, I love you part of it, yeah? So if you're in stage 2 and everything's going swimmingly, you could be blindsided into thinking that this is for life and everything's great. But your Japanese partner might be going through stage 2 and coming up with all these problems they have with you. But because of this gaman thing, they're just not saying it. I had a friend who dated a Japanese girl for 3 years and said it was amazing. And then she left. And he was like, "Why?" And she said, "Well, to tell the truth, I wasn't happy from the very beginning." We have to think a little bit about the motivations of the Japanese people dating a foreigner, because it does take a certain person to want to date a foreigner. Some Japanese will put their hands up and say, "I would never date a foreigner because communication is a problem." But the ironic thing is that communication is the problem. Yeah, I said that right. Is the fact that later in this video we'll talk about how communication can be a massive problem, but it's not what you think. So number 2 leads us into silence replacing communication. And in many relationships, when there is a problem, when there is a potential for confrontation, they default to silence. In a foreign relationship, we might be used to disagreeing, having an argument, finding out more about each other, building together to find out how we can make this work. You know, you have a big argument, you disagree, and then you have some make-up sex? Bah! Well, you know, that doesn't exist because there isn't an argument phase here. I've heard so many stories from foreigners, and I've also experienced it in my own life. It's when you think that there's a problem and you say, is everything okay? The answer is either nothing or yes, everything's fine. And it takes a long time after that to find out that actually it wasn't fine. And this also goes in line with the conversation that you might want to have. You might want to sit down and clear the air a little bit. But that conversation is not going to happen because often you'll be met with, there's nothing wrong, nothing to sit down and talk about. Which leaves you confused, and it also leaves you building up and penting up stress as well. Number 3, being a foreigner in Japan is hard enough, but in a relationship, you're expected to read the air. And reading the air is something that Japanese people are inherently very good at. They're brought up with it. It's just something that Japanese people do that foreigners to a large degree don't quite understand, even if we try our best to do it. And reading the air means that you can walk into a room, read the feeling. And also when you're in a situation where there is some kind of confrontation, just by reading the air and reading what you've done wrong and reading and understanding not to do that again is going to solve the issue. And that's what Japanese people claim to do. Now, I'm pretty sure that it's not as perfect as it all sounds, but foreigners often get finger poked for this. We often get finger poked for not reading the air. Classic examples: talking on the phone on the train, drinking a beer on the train. You know, we often get hollowed out for these things. But the truth is, no matter how much we try, we are constantly blamed for not being able to read the air. And reading the air apparently is a very, very important part of being in a Japanese relationship, or at least a very important part to the success of a Japanese relationship. And it all goes in line with this non-confrontational spirit. Number 4, anger appears suddenly. And it's kind of like, what? What are you saying? I'm contradicting myself. Well, yes, they are non-confrontational until they are. It's like a volcano, all that gammon suppressing all those feelings and that stress. It builds up and it explodes. And if you've ever been in a relationship with a Japanese person, you've probably witnessed the exploding, the screaming that would rival even the most angry of Shiba dogs, the knife wielding, the frying pan throwing, the just opening all the cupboard doors and pulling all the chinaware out onto the floor, the crazy stuff. It's like, wow. I thought arguing with foreigners was bad because, you know, it gets a little bit, vocal. But when you set off the firecracker in a Japanese person, you know about it. It is something to be reckoned with, and if you've ever seen it or you've had an experience of it, please write it down in the comments below because I'll be interested to hear about it. But when it goes off, when that volcano goes, it goes. So be aware, all kinds of crazy stuff can happen. And there were some crazy comments in my last video, and one guy even said that his ex used to cut up his pillows and put the rubbish inside his pillows. And this is kind of thing. And you might think that this is going over the top, but if you've been in a situation, and I'm sure a lot of people will comment below, then you will understand that this is actually a reality. Beware the explosion. This doesn't lead on to the next point, but it's something I need to add here, is that the morning after, it's like nothing ever happened. And as a foreigner, we might be coming downstairs and saying, hey, darling, let's talk about what happened yesterday. Let's clear the air. And you might be met with a response like, what? What happened yesterday? I'm fine. And you're expected just to get on with it. Nothing's talked about. Nothing's resolved. It was it. And now today is today. Don't ruin today by thinking about what happened yesterday is the lesson here. Apparently. Number 5, dependence builds quietly, and it could be your biggest weakness. In Japan, a lot of foreigners become dependent on their spouses for doing paperwork, for filling this form in, filling that form in, doing this, applying for this credit card, doing this, that, and the other. And it's something that sounds terrible on the surface. You might say, why would you allow yourself to get into that situation where she controls all the money? It's something that happens over time, and it kind of quietly creeps up on you. And one day you realize you have no power. And I think that the reason is that a lot of men in these relationships, we get chiseled down slowly over time, eroded slowly by our spouses. Like, for example, I used to love cooking, and I used to often cook romantic dinners, and I used to cook dinner for my girlfriend before she became my wife. But once we were married, the kitchen was her zone, and that was her declaration. She didn't want me cooking. She didn't want me cooking because I left the kitchen in a mess, or I didn't put things in the right place afterwards, or the ingredients to what I made were too expensive. And that slowly made me kind of just not be in the kitchen anymore. Not because I didn't want to be, but that's just how it happened over time. I also had a friend who was criticized for the way he hung up the washing, and so eventually he didn't hang up the washing anymore. And in these situations, when you're going through a divorce or a breakup, one of the reasons can be that you just didn't help me enough. So you can see what's happening here. We tried to help in the beginning, but then we're slowly kind of chiseled down over time, eroded into being pretty useless, actually, to be honest. We lose ourselves. We lose our sense of being, and it's not totally our fault. And that's something to be aware of. And it happens a lot, because once you've lost your sense of being, often your partner will be like, well, I don't even know who you are anymore, and you're not attractive. You're just like a weak little shriveled up guy now, so I'm going to go and find somebody better and somebody new. And so you can see how this problem is quite serious. And it's quite hard to imagine, but as I'm leading into my next point, number 6, which is the family unit, you can see how this might be slightly understandable. Japan still lives in this world where stereotypically the wife is the mother and the husband is the father. And this is something that happens in marriage, and especially after children come along. The husband and wife are not seen as a romantic attachment anymore in many cases. The father becomes the father, and the mother becomes the mother to the whole family, including the father in many cases. And what happens is this: the mother can get annoyed that she's looking after a man-child. And that's one of the main reasons that women leave marriages. What happens here too is because the mother is now a mother, she's called mother or mummy by everybody in the family. And as soon as she becomes mummy, that's when the intimacy also dies down. And as a foreigner dating a Japanese person, you might be getting your fair share of intimacy. But once you step into marriage and after kids, you might not be ready for how the intimacy just gets knocked on the head and doesn't appear ever again. You can talk to many people who have the experience of having sexless marriages or having absolutely no interest from their partner romantically in them anymore. And this is kind of quite a hard thing to deal with and get over, especially as foreigners that come from countries where we believe that romance continues through marriage. I myself tried to employ a date night into our married life, and it was very unsuccessful because my wife didn't want to bother other people to have them come over and look after our kids while we went on date night. And it also turned out she probably wasn't that interested in going on date night because the roles had changed and her mind was probably somewhere else. Which is ironic because when she left me, she utilized all her friends to look after the kids while she was working and doing this, that, and the other. The point is that it's a very, very different family atmosphere than what we might be used to. And once that sets in, it can lead to a lot of problems. Number 7 is that Japanese people on the whole, and I'm not talking about everybody, don't have conflict skills. When arguments arise, everything's very black or white. There's no gray area, there's no negotiation, there's no resolve. It's a very much a, I disagree with you, bang, angry kind of scenario from what I've experienced and what I've heard about. Now, if I'm wrong, please write it in the comments below. I'd love to be educated about this and hear more stories and to learn more about this. But no fighting does not mean no problems, because going back to this idea of non-confrontational gaman, suppressing everything, you can be led into a false sense of security where you think everything's fine. Indeed, I was, and so many other people were, where they thought it was fine, only to come home to find that wife and children were not in the house anymore. This idea of sitting around a table and hashing a few things out every now and again to make sure that we're on the same page does rarely exist here in Japan. And it's not something that's promoted, and it's not something that many Japanese people are able to do. So if you're expecting to discuss, to resolve, to argue a little bit, it might not happen, and it could just leave you in that stressful pool of holding all your feelings inside, but just not being very good at it. Number 8, not being prepared for how the breakup works. Okay, we live in a world now where there are so many different ways to break up, so many people are ghosting, so many people are not even bothering saying that they're going to break up, they just disappear. But in the Japanese world, there is the uchi, which is the in the circle, and there is the soto, which is in the out the circle. So you're either in the circle or you're out the circle. There's no sitting on the line and being half and half. And if you're in a relationship or a marriage, you are a little bit in the circle. But as a foreigner, don't get too comfy because you're never totally in the circle, right? The circle is there and you're in it, ish. But as soon as you're broken up, or as soon as your partner has decided inside themselves that they are not interested anymore, you're on the outside. And they might not tell you for another 2 to 6 months that they've broken up with you. It's a decision they've made, but they just haven't communicated that with you. And that often happens. And this is part of the reason why a lot of guys are blindsided when they come home and their partner is not there anymore. It's such a shock to them. But in actual fact, in many situations, the decision has been made already 6 months, a year before. And that year, 6 months, was just time when they were stockpiling and preparing to get out. So once you're out, you're out. And they treat you like a total stranger. So many foreigners are often surprised at how cold the in-laws or how cold the ex is to them once they are broken up. Even if there are children involved, there are many situations where there is this unnecessary coldness that happens. And it all comes down to the fact that you're out the circle and therefore you are now a stranger. And they don't think about what happened in the past. So what can you do instead to get through this? What are the things that you need to know? Well, first of all, learn the Japanese language. Make sure that you can communicate vocally properly. Second, learn about Japanese culture. These aspects of Japanese culture are going to give you the best chance of success, learning about how Japanese people do things. One time I was in a Japanese bar and the person sitting next to me was a stranger and we were talking about it, and it was very early on when my wife had just left me and I was very sad. And I was talking to him and his one piece of advice was, you just have to be more Japanese. You're not Japanese enough. I can see already why she left you. At the time, it really hurt me. But over time, whether I agree with it or not is beside the point. I learned that he had a point. If he could think like that, so could other Japanese people. So understanding the culture is going to give you the best chance of success here. I hope that what I've said in this video has helped you out here, and if you have any comments, please rock them out below. Please subscribe to the channel, like and support, and you can buy me a coffee if you want. I love coffee, and until next time, I'll see you. Look after yourself. Take care. Bye-bye.